My husband and I recently realized that neither of us were getting the sleep we deserved. So we sat down and talked about our ideal beds. For him, soft as feathers. For me, firm as a plank. This would be a huge issue if it weren't for the Sleep Number Smart Bed. Thankfully, with our new Sleep Number Smart Bed, we can each dial in our desired sleep number settings to our ideal comfort and finally get the sleep we deserve. Plus, the Climate Series feature makes sure our bed stays nice and cool through the warm summer months. Why choose a Sleep Number Smart Bed? So you can choose your ideal comfort on either side. And now it's the Sleep Number Everything Smart Bed sale. Every smart bed and base are on sale during our Memorial Day event. Up to 50% off, limited time, exclusively at a Sleep Number store near you. See store or sleepnumber.com for details.
Mervis Diamonds announces our renovation sale to mark the new modernized Mervis store in Tysons. Diamonds, engagement rings, wedding bands, and fashion jewelry are all on sale. You can acquire diamonds before the tariffs increase and get fabulous jewelry at historic gold prices. We're even offering Mervis gifts of up to 40% off for a very short while. Get the jewelry you've always craved at prices which will never be repeated. The Mervis renovation sale is on now for a limited time at all stores. Mervis Diamond Importers. Go to mervisdiamond.com.
Hello and welcome to mini episode number 443 of Real Life Ghost Stories. And I have two spooky stories for you today, and the last story comes from the 23rd of January 2025. And story number one comes from Paige. A few years into my now husband and I's relationship, we got our first official apartment together with just the two of us. And I use the term apartment loosely. It was a small L-shaped building out by the lake in our local area that was on property that my husband's boss owned. Think very much old cabin vibes. I was told that it was previously used in the 80s as a place for weekend lake rentals, and it also had a bar on the very end of the building. After he bought the property, he had pretty much left it untouched, so you could go into the old bar and see all of the old beer signs and such. It was honestly kind of cool. He did a little work to the tiny unit that we were going to rent, and then we moved on in, excited to finally have a place of our own without any roommates. As soon as we moved in, weird things started happening. It started out small, just some noises from time to time when I would be home alone. And then things got super weird. I would wake up in the middle of the night and my husband would just be sitting straight up in bed. Something he had never done previously in the years we had been together. One night he sat up super quickly and then started opening and closing the drawers on his nightstand extremely fast. And then after a minute or so laid back down as if nothing had happened. To say that I was freaked out would be an understatement, but I just chalked it up to maybe being a form of sleepwalking or something. Then one night, a year or so after moving in there, I woke up and saw a very tall, thin, blacker than black figure standing over him on his side of the bed. I feel like my mind wasn't capable of processing what I was seeing, so I proceeded to lay back down, feeling a bit confused, and fell back asleep. The next morning I woke up and thought, oh, what an odd dream. After my husband woke up, I was about to share with him the strange dream I had had, until he proceeded to tell me that the previous night he woke up and saw a demon standing over him. I freaked out and then told him that I had seen the same thing but thought that I was dreaming. I know that some people would say, oh, it's just sleep paralysis, but I've never heard of two people having the exact same experience on the exact same night. We were extremely freaked out, but also paying barely anything for rent there, so we just tried to push it out of our minds, until the final event happened that made us nope it out of there real fast. We ended up having a baby while we were living there, and her crib was right next to our bed, as I would wake up to nurse her in the middle of the night. One night I woke up, and she was on the complete opposite end of her crib from where I had laid her before I went to sleep, and she was face down gasping for air. She was a newborn, so there's no way she could have rolled and gotten into that situation by herself. After that, I knew it was absolutely time to leave before something else happened. I'm sure that all parents who are listening to this could probably relate to this, right? Where you go, listen, if stuff happens to me, it's fine. The rent is cheap. We're fine. We can deal with some weird late night behaviour, but anything happens to the fucking baby and we're out of there. And I'm pretty sure that anybody listening would be able to relate to that, because you don't have to be a parent to have empathy and compassion and fear for people's safety. But that sounds evil. Like, that sounds evil. And that is not a word that I use lightly. I have to say, I hate the sound of your husband waking up in the middle of the night, sitting up and then opening and closing the drawers on his nightstand really fast. And I know, look, it's some sort of parasomnia, who knows? But either way, that is terrifying. Having never previously done any sort of sleep weirdness, to then suddenly start doing it in this house. And of course I get it. Like, if you saw a tall, thin creature standing over you in the middle of the night, you're just going to be like, oh, I've just obviously had a weird dream. But there's nothing that freaks me out more than when people think they've had a weird dream or sleep paralysis and then somebody else in the house has experienced the same thing on the same night. You cannot say that's coincidence. Like, you can't say that's coincidence. And that thing then standing over your husband, he has that same experience. Listen, I'm glad you got out of there, because there's no point waiting around to see what's going to happen. I always think it's better to overreact than it is to not react at all and then regret it later.
Hey, this is Naomi Ekperigin, co-host of the podcast Couples Therapy. I wanted to talk to you about Boost Mobile, the newest 5G network in the country. Boost Mobile's new network delivers customers the speed and service they'd expect from the big three, plus groundbreaking benefits you'd only get from a true challenger in the industry, like letting people try the network risk-free for 30 days, and offering a $25 per month unlimited plan that's guaranteed to never go up in price. So visit your nearest Boost Mobile store or find them online at boostmobile.com.
My husband and I recently realized that neither of us were getting the sleep we deserved. So we sat down and talked about our ideal beds. For him, soft as feathers. For me, firm as a plank. This would be a huge issue if it weren't for the Sleep Number Smart Bed. Thankfully, with our new Sleep Number Smart Bed, we can each dial in our desired sleep number settings to our ideal comfort and finally get the sleep we deserve. Plus, the Climate Series feature makes sure our bed stays nice and cool through the warm summer months. Why choose a Sleep Number Smart Bed? So you can choose your ideal comfort on either side. And now it's the Sleep Number Everything Smart Bed sale. Every smart bed and base are on sale during our Memorial Day event. Up to 50% off, limited time, exclusively at a Sleep Number store near you. See store or sleepnumber.com for details.
Mervis Diamonds announces our renovation sale to mark the new modernized Mervis store in Tysons. Diamonds, engagement rings, wedding bands, and fashion jewelry are all on sale. You can acquire diamonds before the tariffs increase and get fabulous jewelry at historic gold prices. We're even offering Mervis gifts of up to 40% off for a very short while. Get the jewelry you've always craved at prices which will never be repeated. The Mervis renovation sale is on now for a limited time at all stores. Mervis Diamond Importers. Go to mervisdiamond.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Aura. By the time you hear about a data breach, your information has already been exposed for months. On average, companies take 277 days to report a breach. That's 9 months where hackers have access to your personal data. That's why we're thrilled to partner with Aura. Aura is an all-in-one digital safety solution that monitors the dark web for your phone number, email, and social security number, sending real-time alerts if your info is found. It also includes a VPN, password manager, and data broker removal to help keep you safe. For a limited time, Aura is offering a 14-day free trial plus a dark web scan to check if your personal information has been leaked, all for free at aura.com/safety. That's aura.com/safety to sign up and protect your loved ones. That's AURA.com/safety. Terms apply. Check the site for details.
And story number 2 comes from Jessica. I wrote the story Caller Unknown from mini episode 324. I've had no further visits from my late father since you've read the story, so it seems that I haven't done anything to upset him. However, there were a few things that I forgot to add about the events surrounding my dad's death. He passed away at around 7:30 a.m. About 5 hours earlier, my mom had been sitting with him and he asked her to open the door for them. She had no idea what he was talking about, but he asked her again to open the door for them. By this point he could barely speak, but he told her that his dad and mom were at the front door. The trouble is, his mom passed away 13 years before that, and his dad passed away in 1967. My mom didn't open the door, which I found a bit rude, but I hope they managed to find a way in to pick him up for his final journey. About an hour and a half before my dad passed, my niece, who was 4 at the time, and who also happened to have the closest relationship with my dad, came out of the room she'd been sleeping in and announced to the kitchen full of my family that a man came and told her that Grandpa was going to go to heaven at 7:30. We had no idea who the man that told her that could be. I thought it was my grandpa, her great-grandpa, since he was probably already in the house because he came to pick up my dad. Now, for some context about the man, my mom is extremely Catholic, but at this point in their lives, my sister and I had not introduced our kids to religion at all. They hadn't even been baptised. I left the Catholic Church long before all of this, and I'm now pagan, and my sister, I think, has become an atheist. But a few nights after my dad died, my niece saw a picture of Jesus in my mom's room and pointed at it and said, "That kind of looks like the man who told me Grandpa was going to heaven." We were all a bit speechless, and my mom started crying. I still don't know how I feel about it, because it could have just been her 4-year-old brain trying to make sense of a situation that she didn't fully understand. Was it really Jesus that came to tell her my dad was leaving? I don't know. But from the teachings I learned as a child, it would make the most sense. Jesus came to the most innocent of the household, who could comprehend what he was saying, to tell her about Grandpa so that she could relay the message to all of us. So who knows? But it was a bit of comfort to her and helped her to process the day of my dad's death. A few weeks ago, my mom had to take his car to the dealer because it needed some work done. When she dropped the car off, the woman at the service counter told her, "Oh yes, I spoke to your husband this morning." My mom looked confused and asked her if she was sure, and the woman said, "Yes, Mr. Larson called to make sure that the appointment for the 2017 Chrysler 300 was still at 9 a.m. I told him it was, and he said that his wife, Maureen, my mom, would be bringing it in. My dad has been dead for 5 years. My mom didn't want to freak the poor woman out, so she just thanked her and went outside to wait for me to pick her up, and told me the story on the way home. She started the story with, "Well, your dad called the dealership this morning." Now, I have another unrelated story that I would like to share, and I want to give a trigger warning for listeners that it does mention sexual assault. I was in the military in the early to mid-2000s. Unfortunately, I endured a sexual assault early into being at my first duty station. After that, I fell into a deep depression and obviously developed PTSD. When I moved to my second duty station, my depression worsened due to terrible leadership, harassment and bullying. This is when I began to experience what I think was sleep paralysis, but to this day I'm still not sure if that's what it was. I'm also not sure if my mental health had anything to do with it either. I had a nighttime ritual that I developed after my assault to make sure the window and door of my barracks room were fully locked. I did this religiously because I wouldn't be able to sleep if I didn't. One night I had done my checks to make sure everything was locked and I went to bed. The way my room was laid out, my bed faced the door, so if I was laying down I'd be able to see the door open and see whoever was on the other side. About 5 hours later, I woke up to the sound of my door being opened, but I couldn't move. I couldn't even scream. I was terrified that it was a person who had broken into my room, but what came in was definitely not human. At first, it was 3 little imp-like creatures, all about 3 feet tall. They were all black, like shadow creatures with glowing red eyes. They were laughing in a beastly, malicious tone when they jumped on my bed and began scratching at me and pulling my hair. My door was still open, and that's when I saw it. This creature was a shadow creature with red eyes as well, but it was tall. It had to bend over to get into the door, and it was lanky. But it had a terrifying smile across its face. The smaller creatures ignored it and vice versa, like they were there for different reasons. The taller creature never spoke or made any sounds. It just watched me with its terrifying smile while contorting its upper body and tilting its head from side to side. Again, I was literally paralysed and couldn't even scream. The first night they stayed for what seemed like hours, but when they finally disappeared, I was able to move and fell back asleep. The next morning I noticed that my door was now unlocked, even though I fully remembered locking it before I got into bed. I endured these visits for weeks after that first night, and every morning my door would be unlocked after I knew I had locked it the night before. I began going back to Mass to see if it would help, but it didn't. In fact, me going back to Mass seemed to anger the tall creature, and one night it got closer to me and finally spoke. It asked me in a very scratchy, inhuman voice,
"Where is your God now?"
Now, this is the part that would seem incredibly unbelievable and probably unnecessarily funny. I was getting mad at this point. I was also still scared beyond belief, and was eventually able to barely whisper back, "Fuck off." The creature seemed surprised by my response and did a movement I can only describe as pearl clutching. It and the imps left my room in a hurry. They did come back the following few nights, and it was just as it had been at the start of these visits. I had the Catholic chaplain come and bless my room, but it still didn't do anything to stop the creatures. I finally did a cleansing ritual not only on my room but on myself. That is when they abruptly stopped showing up. One night they were there and the next night nothing. And my door was locked when I woke up. They never returned, and I was too scared to tell anyone about what happened to me, including my therapist. I was too afraid I'd be deemed unfit for duty and get kicked out of the military. This is only the second time I've told this story, and I still get chills remembering this experience. I haven't seen the creatures since then, but I am terrified that they will show up out of the blue again. First of all, I'm so sorry that you went through this. I mean, sexual assault is absolutely horrendous, and PTSD is absolutely horrendous. And even if you could kind of definitively say, right, this was not something paranormal, this was because of PTSD and sleep paralysis, right? Say that's definitively proven. It doesn't make it any less terrifying, right? Imagine that's what your brain does if it's going through trauma, that it creates this horrific situation where these creatures are coming into your bedroom at nighttime. I mean, that is absolutely vile. And then equally, like, if this is something paranormal, if this is something external that has arrived on the scene because you were going through a really difficult time, and, you know, the assault, the bullying, the harassment, the feeling so depressed and down and PTSD, and then what? These things come from the ether and they're like, oh, brilliant, we can come and feed off all this misery. Just doesn't bear thinking about. But I'm glad that you told them to fuck off and it made them clutch their pearls and left the room. I'd be like, yeah, not so big now, are you? And I totally understand why you didn't tell people. You know, I totally understand that you're thinking, I can't talk to people about this because people are going to think that I am losing my mind and I'll get kicked out and I'll have been deemed unfit for duty, right? But I'm glad you shared this story here, because there are people who are listening who will have had similar situations. And like I said, and like you said in the story yourself, you don't know whether it was sleep paralysis or whether it was something really paranormal. And, you know, it is not delegitimizing your experience whatsoever, because regardless of whether it was paranormal or regardless of whether it was sleep paralysis, it doesn't make it any less terrifying or traumatic. And going back to your stories about your dad, how incredible is it that around the time of people's deaths, all these strange things happened? So first of all, open the door for them is wild, right? Because we often hear stories about loved ones that have passed away previously coming back to collect somebody when it is their time. And Christ, you'd like to think that that's what happens. I would like to think that when I die, the people that I have loved and lost will be there waiting for me. And like that, it kind of makes thinking about death a little bit easier, right? And we know that the veil is thinner for kids, right? That is something that we have seen time and time again. And I found this really interesting because obviously your mom is extremely Catholic, and to Catholics, Jesus Christ is very important. And it might be, like you said, that this was your niece's way of kind of trying to understand what was happening around her, because obviously when you know that somebody's going to die, even if you try and keep it from kids, there is an atmosphere and there's a sense of tension when you know that somebody is going to die. Equally, I'm not much of a believer, but I don't know what Jesus Christ would be up to. Maybe it was Jesus Christ. Do you know what I mean? Maybe it was a religious moment for this child. And obviously she's not going to know the gravity of that. But also I was thinking, what if we could, in our moments of death, or what if the loved ones that have gone before us, what if they can, manifest to certain people in the household in a form that would bring the most comfort? And I think, as a devout Catholic, maybe the idea of Jesus Christ Superstar knocking around the house would bring your mum the most comfort. You know what I mean? I also love the fact that your dad is still doing car shit. Even 5 years after his death, he is still checking in and being like, right, I just want to make sure that this appointment for my car is happening and that Maureen is going to be bringing the car in. I love that. I think that's so sweet. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Paige and to Jessica for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story came from the 23rd of January 2025. And if you would like to send your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you can get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
This podcast is brought to you by Aura. By the time you hear about a data breach, your information has already been exposed for months. On average, companies take 277 days to report a breach. That's 9 months where hackers have access to your personal data. That's why we're thrilled to partner with Aura. Aura is an all-in-one digital safety solution that monitors the dark web for your phone number, email, and social security number, sending real-time alerts if your info is found. It also includes a VPN, password manager, and data broker removal to help keep you safe. For a limited time, Aura is offering a 14-day free trial plus a dark web scan to check if your personal information has been leaked, all for free at aura.com/safety. That's aura.com/safety to sign up and protect your loved ones. That's AURA.com/safety. Terms apply. Check the site for details.